One moment she was arranging flowers in the kitchen window, humming along to the radio. The next, she collapsed. By the time the ambulance arrived at our farmhouse outside Saskatoon, my wife Eleanor was gone. The doctors said it was a massive stroke. Instantaneous. She didn't suffer. That was supposed to be a comfort, but it wasn't. Not when the woman you'd loved for 12 years, the woman who'd taught you what real partnership meant, was suddenly just absent. The funeral was held at Knox Presbyterian, the small stone church where Eleanor and I had been married. I stood at the front, shaking hands with neighbors who'd known Eleanor since childhood, accepting condolences from the farming families we'd worked alongside. Eleanor's 2 sons from her first marriage, Brett and Colin, stood off to the side. Brett was 34, worked in Calgary for an oil company. Colin was 31, lived in Edmonton, something in finance. Both wore expensive dark suits. Both had flown in the night before. Neither had visited their mother in the 3 years prior. I'd met Eleanor when I was 52 and she was 53. I'd been running a small veterinary practice in town. Never married, too absorbed in work and too particular, my sister always said. Eleanor had been widowed for 7 years when we met at a community fundraiser. Her first husband, the boy's father, had died of cancer when Brett was 18 and Colin was 15. She'd raised them alone while managing the family farm, 200 acres of canola and wheat that had been in her family for 4 generations. Our courtship was slow, proper. We were both set in our ways, both carrying our own histories. But Eleanor had this laugh, this way of finding joy in small things. A perfect sunset, fresh bread, the first snow of winter. She made me understand what I'd been missing. We married in a simple ceremony. I sold my practice in town and moved to the farm. It wasn't about the land or the money. It was about spending whatever time we had left together. The boys never accepted me. At the wedding, Brett gave a stiff toast that barely mentioned me. Colin didn't come at all, sent a card with a generic message. Over the 12 years Eleanor and I were married, I could count on 2 hands the number of times they visited. Christmas maybe, if it was convenient. A weekend here and there. They'd arrive, exchange pleasantries with their mother, and largely ignore me. When Eleanor brought up family dinners or holiday plans, there were always excuses. Work commitments, prior engagements, too far to drive. I never pushed it. They were grown men with their own lives. Their father had died when they were still young. I understood the complication of having their mother remarry. I gave them space, hoping time would soften things. Eleanor felt it, though. I'd catch her staring at her phone after another canceled visit, her smile a little dimmer. She never complained, never put me in the middle, but I knew it hurt her. After the service, people gathered at the farmhouse. Neighbors brought casseroles and squares. Eleanor's cousin Patricia set out coffee and tea. I moved through the rooms in a daze, accepting embraces, nodding at stories about Eleanor's kindness, her community involvement, the way she could make anyone feel welcome. Brett and Colin stood in the dining room with their wives, Shauna and Melissa. They were polite, subdued. We barely spoke. The last guest left around 7. Patricia offered to stay and help clean up, but I told her I needed to be alone. She hugged me, tears in her eyes, and drove back to town. I started washing dishes, needing something to do with my hands. That's when Brett appeared in the kitchen doorway. "We need to talk," he said. Colin was behind him. Both had changed out of their suits into casual clothes. They looked like they were preparing for something. "Of course," I said, drying my hands. "Should we sit in the living room?" "Here's fine," Brett said. He didn't move from the doorway. "We've been discussing the estate, Mom's assets, the farm." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "All right, this land has been in our family for over 100 years, Colin said. 4 generations. Our great-grandfather cleared this land. Our grandfather built this house. Our father worked these fields his entire life, until cancer took him. I know the history," I said quietly. "Your mother told me many times. She was proud of it." "Then you understand that it belongs to the family," Brett said. "The real family." The words hung in the air between us. I set down the dish towel, trying to process what was happening. "You were married to our mother for 12 years, Colin continued. "Our parents were married for 23. She built this farm with our father. She raised us here. This is our inheritance, not yours." I never thought I started. "We're not here to debate it," Brett cut me off. His voice was firm, businesslike, the same tone I imagine he used in boardrooms. We've already consulted with a lawyer. We know Saskatchewan law. We know you have certain rights as a surviving spouse. But we're offering you a fair deal, something that avoids a lengthy legal battle that would drain the estate and leave everyone worse off. Shauna and Melissa entered the kitchen then. Melissa was carrying a leather folder. She set it on the kitchen table, the same table where Eleanor and I had eaten breakfast that very morning, where she'd laughed at something on the morning news. We're prepared to offer you $400,000, Brett said. That's generous, considering the circumstances. You sign over any claim to the farm, the house, the equipment, Mom's accounts, everything. You have 90 days to vacate the property. The money will be transferred once you're out, and the deed is transferred. I looked at the folder on the table, then at the four of them standing in my kitchen, in Eleanor's kitchen. This is my home. For 12 years, Colin said. We grew up here. This house has our childhood in every room. Our father's sweat is in every fence post. You're a guest who overstayed. I loved your mother, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Maybe you did, Brett said. Or maybe you saw a lonely widow with valuable land. Either way, you benefited from her success, from generations of work you had no part in building. 400,000 is more than fair compensation for 12 years of comfort. We can make this easy, or we can make this difficult, Colin added. If you fight us, we'll contest everything. We'll argue undue influence. We'll dig into every financial transaction you and Mom made. We'll make it ugly. The legal fees alone will eat up half the estate. Or you can take the money, start fresh somewhere else, and let this land stay in the family where it belongs. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together. Our mother isn't here anymore, Brett said flatly. We're the ones left to deal with reality. We're the ones who have to protect what she and our father built. You need to think about this practically, Shauna said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was softer than the men's, but no less certain. You're what, 64? You sold your veterinary practice years ago. You have no children, no one depending on you. $400,000 is enough to buy a nice condo in Saskatoon or Regina, live comfortably. Why would you want to stay here anyway? Alone, trying to manage a working farm at your age. We're giving you a way out, Melissa added. A generous way out. Brett slid the folder across the table toward me. These are the documents. Our lawyer prepared them. They're straightforward. You sign, we all move forward. You have until the end of the week to decide. But I'd suggest you don't drag this out. The offer won't improve. And if I refuse? I asked. The four of them exchanged glances. Colin spoke. Then we file a challenge to any claim you might have. We have birth certificates, family photos, documentation going back generations proving this is our family legacy. We have character witnesses who'll testify that you isolated Mom from us, that you manipulated an elderly woman. We'll fight for every acre, every dollar. And in the end, you'll get nothing except a massive legal bill. They left the folder on the table and filed out. I heard them upstairs in the bedrooms where they'd slept as children, gathering their things. 20 minutes later, both cars pulled out of the driveway, headed back to Calgary and Edmonton. I sat at the kitchen table as darkness fell, the folder unopened in front of me, Eleanor's absence filling every corner of the house. I didn't sleep that night. I walked through the farmhouse, touching things Eleanor had touched. Her reading glasses on the side table, the quilt she'd been working on, photos on the mantel of her and the boys when they were young, smiling, close. There were fewer photos from recent years, almost none that included me. By morning, I'd made a decision. I drove into Saskatchewan and went to see James Kowalski, a lawyer I knew from my years running the veterinary practice. I'd done pro bono work for the animal shelter he supported. We'd served together on a few community boards. James listened as I explained what had happened. He was 68, silver-haired, with the careful, measured manner of someone who'd spent 40 years navigating people through their worst days. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have a copy of Eleanor's will?" he asked. "I don't know if she had one," I admitted. "We never discussed it in detail. She handled the farm's business affairs. I trusted her." James made some notes. "In Saskatchewan, if there's no will, the estate is divided according to the Intestate Succession Act. As her spouse, you'd be entitled to the first 200,000 of the estate. Then you'd split the remainder with her children. Given the farm's value, you'd likely receive around 40% total. That's not what I want, I said. I don't want to fight her sons for money. Then what do you want, Richard? I thought about Eleanor arranging those flowers, humming. I thought about 12 years of quiet mornings, shared work, the way she'd take my hand when we walked to check on the fields at sunset. I want to honor her memory. I want to do what she would have wanted, which is, I don't know, I said honestly. But I know taking 400,000 and disappearing, isn't it? She loved that farm. It meant something to her beyond money. James studied me. If there is a will, and if it leaves you nothing, you can still claim spousal support under Saskatchewan law. If it leaves you something, and they contest, this could take years. It'll be expensive, emotionally draining. Brett and Colin can afford good lawyers. Can you? I have some savings from selling my practice. Not much, but some. That's not what I asked. Can you afford this fight? Not just financially, emotionally. These are her sons. Even if you win, you lose in a sense. I understood what he was saying, but I kept thinking about something Eleanor had told me once, about 2 years into our marriage. We'd been sitting on the porch, watching a thunderstorm roll across the fields. She'd said, "My boys think strength is about never backing down, never showing weakness. Their father taught them that. But real strength is knowing when to fight and when to let go. It's about protecting what matters, not just what's yours." I need to know what Eleanor wanted, I told James. If she left a will, I need to know what it says. If she wanted her sons to have everything, I'll accept that. But I won't be bullied into signing away my rights without knowing. James nodded slowly. All right, let me make some inquiries. Give me a few days. I went back to the farm. The folder was still on the kitchen table. I moved it to the desk in the study, unopened. Over the next week, I fell into a strange routine. I fed the chickens Eleanor had kept, tended her garden, fixed a broken fence post. Neighbors stopped by with more food, more condolences. I thanked them, accepted their kindness, didn't mention the ultimatum from Brett and Colin. On the 5th day, Brett called my cell phone. "Have you made a decision?" "I'm thinking about it," I said. "There's nothing to think about. It's a generous offer. Sign the papers." "I'm speaking with a lawyer." There was a pause. "That's a mistake. You're wasting money on legal fees for nothing. We're trying to make this easy for you." "I appreciate that," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'll be in touch." He hung up without saying goodbye. 2 days later, James called. "Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I drove into town, my stomach tight with anxiety. James's secretary showed me into his office. He had several documents spread across his desk. "I found Eleanor's will," he said. "It was filed with Kaufman and Associates, a law firm here in Saskatoon. Eleanor updated it about 8 months ago, apparently without telling anyone." "What does it say?" James looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Before I show you, I need to ask. Did Eleanor ever mention changing her will? Did she give you any indication of her intentions?" "No," I said. "We didn't talk about death. We were focused on living." "And Brett and Colin? Did they know she was updating her will?" "I have no idea." "Why?" James slid a document across the desk. "Because this is going to come as a significant shock to them, and I want to make sure you're prepared for their reaction." I picked up the will. It was 8 pages, formal legal language that took me a moment to parse. And then I saw it. Eleanor had divided her estate as follows: 70% to me, 15% to Brett, and 15% to Colin. The farm, the house, the equipment, her savings accounts, all of it split with me, receiving the lion's share. There was a letter attached, dated 8 months prior, in Eleanor's handwriting. James watched me read. "There's a clause that's particularly relevant to your situation. Eleanor specified that if her sons contested the will or attempted to pressure you to surrender your inheritance, their shares would be reduced to 5% each, with the remaining 20% going to the Saskatchewan Cancer Society in memory of her first husband. She wanted them to have something, but she also wanted to ensure they treated you with respect." I sat back, the papers trembling in my hands. "Why didn't she tell me?" "The letter might explain." James pointed to it. I read Eleanor's words, written in her neat cursive. "My dearest Richard, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about this will. Sorry I left you to discover it this way. But I knew if I told you, you'd try to talk me out of it. You'd say it should all go to Brett and Colin, that you didn't marry me for my assets, that family comes first. I know you, my love. You're too selfless for your own good. The truth is, this farm stopped being about blood family a long time ago. When their father died, I worked this land alone for 7 years. The boys were young men by then, building their own lives in the cities. They came home less and less. I understood. The farm held painful memories for them, memories of their father's illness, his suffering. They wanted distance from that pain. When you came into my life, everything changed. You didn't see this farm as a burden or an obligation. You saw it as our home. You learned to drive the tractor, even though you'd never farmed a day in your life. You stayed up all night with me during calving season. You held me when I cried on the anniversary of my first husband's death. You made me laugh again. You made me feel like life wasn't over, that there were still beautiful days ahead. I love my sons. I always will.